when I was asked, Scott, how did you create community? You think about it, and you want to make it very complex. You want to make it, you want to make it something that everybody can understand. And I really had to break it down the same way that I learned to break everything down like a chef. And when I look at that, you really have to talk about your ingredients, and you have to understand how your ingredients developed, where the flavors come in, what makes them unique. And that's really how you put things together. So the key ingredient when you think about community is people. And when we talk about people, I'm going to be very direct. We're talking about Homo sapiens, okay? Because the Homo sapien really changed everything on the face of the planet, and not because of some mystical woo-woo quality or any special thing, but it's really about our biochemistry and our makeup, and what I'm talking about is our brain. The human brain was the first brain that was able to handle complex thought to a degree that we could create new worlds. But the problem with this, in the face of the way that the world looked at everything, was that we weren't ready when we were born. If you have a deer can start walking within a day of being born. A lion can make its first kill within a year. A human being can't even walk for a year, and it's not able to take care of itself for 14 years on the planet. Now this changes the way that everything has to be handled, because that means that you have to stay and you have to raise a child. If your species is going to survive, you have to raise that child for 14 years before it can go anywhere. And that changes where you do things. You can't stay on the move. You have to hunker down. And if you're going to hunker down, you've got to feed that child. You've got to feed yourself. You've got to be able to grow. And in order to do that, what we did as a species is that we settled near water where we could grow crops. This happened about 160,000 years ago. We realized the first human being, someone identical to us, existed. Buckminster Fuller gave us a chart which basically shows how human knowledge has gone throughout time. And if you look at it, what we know is that our first civilization, where we had a written language, occurred about 5,000 years ago. So we were on the planet for 160,000 years before we developed a written language. We knew how to build a house. We understood agriculture. That's a really, really long time for information to grow, okay? What are we looking at there? That's about 135,000 years before we could basically gather as groups and survive in any level. And everything that we developed was to propagate our survival. So we created codes, 10 Commandments, Hammurabi's Code. Everything that we developed was to create a level of survival within ourselves and to keep the species propagating. And we've continued to do this throughout time. And after about 3,500 years ago, knowledge started doubling every century. So we continue to go on this growth chart all the way until about 1900. And at this time, we formed large communities, nation states, religious orders, all over. At this point, knowledge started doubling every 50 years. And it's now on a curve, the Buckminster Fuller's knowledge doubling curve, which basically says that our information is growing so fast now that every 13 months we develop new knowledge. The thing that defines us as a species is that we're not ready when we come out the gate, much like me in this speech. But what we're able to develop is so much more complicated. And we're now at a point where all the critical information in the world, there's so much that initially it might take us 4 years just to understand the critical things to keep us alive. At this point, human maturity is somewhere in the mid-20s. Now, if you think about that, not only have we moved away from a world where, if we live in the United States, survival isn't our number one concern anymore. The rules that define the society that we live in are no longer survival-based. We're talking about new problems, right? We've created new games, new mechanics, new us chemistry to take us to another level. We're thinking about space migration, increased intelligence, life extension. And we don't have to worry about surviving. We don't have to go to a job all day. The majority of the people that hang out in my hub, they could stay home all day if they wanted to, because they work from a laptop. But they don't. They need that community. They need that interaction, right? So we've created a new space, a new time where people really have to, they still need to gather. They're still maturing. It's harder to mature now than it ever was at any other point. So what do we need? We need that same watering hole, that same place where we can be nourished, where we can share knowledge with each other. And that's exactly what Eve represents. Now, the problem is that we all know this in every community anywhere across the world. We want these places. We want these spaces. But the revenue that's dedicated to it that we've created in our complex system, in other words, our government, our taxes, they've got to go to all kinds of things. So really, you have to leave it to capitalists at this point. And we're talking about intentional capitalists who will create spaces where people can gather and share their knowledge. So really what we want to talk about is that a community is a responsibility for everybody to hold. Thank you very much, folks. Okay.